Hi everyone, this is Trisha, and I'm back again today with another watercolor project for you. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create some winter cottages. I created this card from for Art Impressions blog for Watercolor Weekend, and a lot of people requested a video be done for it. So I came back and I created, it's a little bit different, but it's the same concept. So I hadn't recorded the first card because I actually did it while I was hanging out with my mom and we were doing some watercoloring together. So I decided to go back in and create a whole new video for you. So that's the video you're going to see today. So let's get started. The products you're going to need for this project are the cottages from the Mini Cottages Set and the topper from the Fir Trees Set. Just going to use that small topper there, which happens to be one of my favorite stamps at this point. So I'm using my positioner and I have my first cottage. So I'm going to place it there, and the reason I'm using a positioner is because I really want to make sure these are in an exact spot and that they're straight. So I'm using the positioner. I'm inking each stamp up with sepia for the house, and I'm using an African violet for the roof. And I'm doing that because I want to make sure that I want to actually create a snowy roof. So the African violet's going to help me with that. I made masks out of post-it notes for each of the houses because I'm going to place them behind, and I want to make sure I protect the house in the front. So I'm using my stamp positioner again, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it up a little bit and to the left a little bit. And I want to make sure that I place it where I want it. You see there's, on this first house, there's a chimney. So I want to make sure that that chimney is placed strategically so that it doesn't look funny. You know, I don't want it on the side of the house. I don't want it in a window. So I'm going to make sure that I place it exactly where I want it. Now I'm going to re-ink it up, and then I'm going to stamp it down. I'm going to place another. Well, before I placed the mask, I guess I decided I was going to ink up the third house. So here I am inking it with the African violet, and then I've already inked it with the sepia. So I'm going to put the mask on the second house and make sure that's down really well. Now I'm going to use my stamp positioner, and I'm going to stamp the third house onto the little sheet, and I'm going to move that up and again to the left, and I'm going to position that exactly where I want it, which looks like about right there. And I'm going to I re-inked up my stamp, and I'm going to place it right there. Now I'm going to put another mask on that house, and then I'm going to do the same process, with the exception that I'm not going to re-ink the stamp. I'm going to huff on the stamp after I stamp it onto the positioner. So I'm using my sepia here for the house itself. And then I'm going to use the African violet on the roof, with just the roof. Being careful not to get that little chimney with the African violet. Now I'm going to stamp that into the positioner, and again I'm going to move it up and to the left of that last house. Now doing this is going to give the illusion that they're along the side of a road. Now what I'm doing is I'm just huffing on that stamp to reactivate those inks, and you can see I still get a nice impression even though it's second generation. Now I'm going to take all of the masks off of the houses, and I've actually sped this video up a little bit because it does take some time, so I wanted to, in the essence of time, I just wanted to speed it up a little bit. So you can see right now I'm pulling the color out of the lines on that very first house, just pulling a little bit into the center. I'm going to add some color to these houses later, so this is really just pulling the shadows in where I want them and to soften those lines up a little bit. around the windows, and then behind this little, I don't know, this little stone walkway. Not walkway, but the stone area that's on the front of the house. It reminds me of a house that I used to own in Jersey. We had that little stone face in the front of our house. So I really wanted it to kind of look that way. So I'm going to show you using the palette how we create some stones onto that front walkway there, or front area, after I pull the color out. And I'm just pulling just a slight amount of the African violet into the roof of the building, just so it makes the hint of snow on top of those roofs. And along the side there too. I think I put some violet over there. Now I'm going to put some color down on my palette, and I'm going to, well, after I screw with the roof again. Or I guess I'm going to pull all the color out. It's been a while since I recorded this video. Sorry if I'm a little off here. I'm going to add some additional shadows into those roof areas, but I'm going to pull out the color out of there as well. Again, these are all going to look the same until we start adding the color from the palette to the houses themselves. So I'm pulling out on the left-hand side of this house and out from underneath the eaves, and just pulling that color right into the middle. I want to make sure that I'm leaving some highlights as well, so that these houses maintain their dimension. And I'm pulling just a very little bit amount out of the roof, just to give a shadow. And I'll continue to do this for all of the houses. Not being too careful not to pull the African violet and the sepia in, because it's really not going to matter after I color it in. I do want to maintain some of those really dark areas, so I'm adding some more African violet into those areas just to darken them right up. I'm using a number 8 silver brush, which has become one of my favorite brushes to use. Now I'm moving on to the third house, which I'm going to do the same way as I did the second and first houses. Making sure I get those chimneys as well. This one's a little different because it looks like it has a wall in between them, so I'm really darkening that in-between wall up. And then I'm just pulling the color out of the lines. And I tend to get a little more detailed. As you know, if you've seen any of my other videos, I get a little more detailed. But I came up with this idea when my mother and I were watercoloring one day, because she's learning how to watercolor, so I'm trying to help her, and she was working on her project, and I thought I would work on this card for my watercolor weekend blog post for Art Impressions. And I had seen a video from Christina Warner on this cute little, I don't even know, it was some kind of animal in a car, and she was putting it on a road, and she used this technique to put the trees so that they looked like they were coming down the road. And I just thought that was the greatest idea, so I thought I could use it for a card, and it came out great, I think. And it seems like you guys like it, so that's why, hence I'm doing this video for you. Now I put some sepia back on my palette, and I'm coming in here and I'm adding some shadows. I zoomed in a little bit more because I wanted to show you how I created the little stone entranceway. That's what it is, entranceway. I'm using a couple of different colors. I think I used a sepia, and then I used a mocha, and then an African violet, just to give some variation in the stones. It's not a big deal. I'm really just putting dots down, but it gives the illusion that it's textured, which is what I was going for. And I'm just kind of filling them in too with some sepia behind that's really watered down so that you can really see those stones pop out. And then I'll add some more sepia to the back behind that little stone entranceway there, so it pops out just a little bit more and it doesn't get lost in the background. I think I'm going to start, that was the little roof on that little part of the house. Adding some more sepia to my palette. And now I'm going to really darken in some of those areas and add some more color to the sides of the house. And I'm still trying to maintain a highlight. So I'm not coloring it in completely, which is very, very important, as you know. Now here's where I'm going to go around that stone entranceway a little bit more and darken the house behind it so that it really pops out. And I'm just going to come in with some clean water and soften out those lines so I can maintain that highlight. Then I'll just add a little bit more to the sides just to darken in some of those areas and to finish off that door. Okay, so now I'm going to use the back of my sepia pen and just darken in that little doorknob and the chimney on that side. So for the second house, I'm coming in with some English red. And first I'm going to just color in the entire house with the red, giving it some highlights. What I'm going to do is I'm going to texturize this one too. I tried to make it look like it was bricks. I think I need a little more practice on creating the brick look, because I kind of did it with dots, and I think I should use dashes. I think it would look more like a brick, and I really want to try it again to try to maintain that highlight again, because I think I lost some of the highlight, but it's okay because it still works. So now I'm just going in and making dots all over the front of the house just to give it some texture. And then I'll go in with a less water, more color, so that it's a little darker. And I'll go in again and create some more dots around. I really like the way the texture is. I like the way it just gives it such a different look. And I really want to keep the right-hand side of those houses really dark, because the light would be coming from the left, as that's how all the houses are. They're all facing that way. So it would be like your light source is in the top left-hand corner. Now I skipped over the third house and went on to the fourth house. I'm not sure why, but I'm creating this with a bottled green color. And I'm kind of making it so that it's striped. So it looks like there are little stripes coming down, maybe like a wood siding. And then I'll add some more color as it dries to underneath the eaves, just to give them a little darker appearance. But generally it's going to be a greenhouse, and it's going to look a little bit stripy. And then I need to come in with some African violet and darken up those eaves and that side of that house a little bit more. Just pull the color right down, maintaining a highlight at the bottom. So I'm going and moving on to this third house, which I'm doing in a Prussian, I think it's just a blue, just a regular blue color. And I'm adding that in from my palette right over that brown to keep that highlight. See how it just makes it darker? And I don't have to use so many layers of the blue because the brown really creates the darkness there for me. So I'm just going to go in and color that whole thing in with the blue. And then I'm adding some lines left to right just to give it a little more texture. Give a little different look. Now I'm taking some really watered down African violet and just the tip of my brush, and I'm pulling some color out and trying to make the look of snow. So I put a little bit on my brush and then I'm just dragging the color along the base of each of the houses just to ground them and to make them look like they have a little bit of snow covering. This is so easy to do. I'm also pulling a little bit of the purple or the African violet out where their walkways would be, creating a little shadow there as a little hint of a kind of a drive or a sidewalk in the snow. It could have just snowed, so it's just a little tiny area that someone has shoveled out. And the same thing here. I'm bringing the color nice and over and then just dragging it out. I'm going to come in with some clean water and just soften those lines as well after I lay this color down. And snow is good. Snow is forgiving. You can kind of make squiggly lines and it'll look like snow. It's very easy to do. I'm trying to decide where I'm going to put some more snow, and then I'll finish it off and do the top one with a little highlight, just like that. So now I'm coming in here with just some clean water and I'm just softening up those lines and pulling them out a little bit so that they're not so harsh. And they look like shadows more than lines. And I'm just using the tip of my brush here, just to soften that up. Pulling those driveways right out into what we're gonna make a little bit of a street here in a second after I soften these lines up. Be very careful when you're doing, like this house is red, so you don't want to be pulling any of that red into your snow, which it looks like I got a little bit in there, but you just got to be careful with colors like that because red is very potent, and if you touch it, it will bleed into your other colors or into your white space. Okay, so now we've pulled all of our snow. I think it looks pretty good. Now we're going to start making, I'm going to make this little snowbank from the plow truck. That's how I pictured it. How would it look if a plow truck had just come by? And I'm just really just kind of moving the color with my brush. It's very light and very soft. It's not a lot of color. It's just kind of what's left on my palette. And then I'm just going to take something a little more concentrated, and I'm just going to make these squiggly lines to make it look like some of the road is peeking out underneath that snowbank. So just creating some shadows under there. Now I decided that it was kind of plain looking, so this was a little different than the card that I made for the blog. I actually created some mountains back here, and all I did was take my paintbrush and just make a couple of what look like hills, and then a little horizon line back here to give it a little more depth, and then soften it out. It's just the hint of maybe some mountains in the background. Way off in the distance. They're not near the houses. They're just a nice view for them. And I'm going to pull a little bit of that color into the mountains itself to make it look like they're snowy. And give them some depth and some, just to give them some depth. And this softens them up as well. So I'm going to take, and I'm just going to soften them out. I'm going to take a little bit more color and just add a few more highlights here. And a couple more shadows in the back. This is very easy to do. Creating mountains are probably the easiest, because they're just shapes. They're just half oval. Rounded triangles, half ovals, however you want to look at them. So now we have our houses and we have our mountains in the background. So I'm going to put my masks back over my houses so that we can put our trees in behind the houses themselves, because we don't want them just in this stark Arctic with the mountains, and then they kind of look lost. So I wanted to ground them a little bit more using some trees. So what I'm going to use is just that tree topper from the Fir Trees Set. I use this stamp all the time, making all kinds of trees, small bushes, trees, everything. I think it's probably one of my favorite stamps. I want to make sure I really cover that house up. I don't want it to get trees in it. So make sure those are all nice and firm. And then I'm going to take my tree. This one I just inked up the top half of it because I wanted this small tree on the side and I didn't want it to come down too far. So I'm inking them up with some pine green, and then I'm just randomly placing trees around the houses. I'm re-inking when I think I need it, and then I'm probably doing 4 or 5 different generations here, because the ones that are really light are going to really give some depth to the forest behind it. This I decided it needed a little tree on the side. So I'm just randomly kind of stamping that all over the place to make it look like there's some trees behind all of these houses. I could have gone all the way out into where those mountains are, but I really didn't feel like it was necessary, that it gave them as much of a background as it needed. I still wanted it to look like it had a lot of snow out there in the background leading up to the mountains. And it's fun. You could do more trees out back there. You could do just the tree topper, the top of the tree topper, so just a small line of light trees underneath the mountain. That would look cute. That would look like another row of trees out back there. Now this I'm really just kind of doing 3rd and 4th generation out in the back of these other trees, just to give a little more depth. And then I thought they needed some little shrubs on the sides of them. So I'm just inking up the very top and stamping them next to the houses. So you'll notice I'm just using the top and just doing it a few times just to give a little hint of a little bush there. And you can come in as many times as you need to get the look that you want. Don't be afraid to, you know, come back in a few times after you're done just to darken some areas up that you think might need a little more color. I wanted a little tree right here in the front. So now I'm just going to take my brush. Oh, that one needed a little more. I'm going to take off all of these masks first before I start adding water to the trees themselves. I'm going to soften this one out. That bottom of that tree kind of got in there, so I'm really using a lot of water to soften that out. And then I'm just going to touch these trees. I'm not going to color them in solid. I'm going to leave some white space because that's going to give us our depth. And I'm just going to soften all of these lines. I'm not using a lot of water here. I'm kind of making sure that I'm filling in where they would be behind the trees themselves. I think on the card I didn't put the mountains, I just put a sky in. So that's an option too. Every time you do this, your watercoloring, they're always going to come out different. So you could do the same scene 4 different times and it's going to look different every time. That's the perfect, I think that's the best part of this type of watercoloring, is that it's always different even though you're doing the exact same thing. And I'm just touching this little tree in the front. I think he's my favorite tree. Looks like he's really sitting in a big thing of snow. Snow is my favorite. I have a house in Vermont, so snow is definitely something we see a lot of. Just adding a little bit of green to the front of this red house here. Softening this little bush, and then I'll finish it up with these bushes up here. It's a nice and relaxing project. It's very easy. There's no stress on it at all. When you're watercoloring, I find that it's very therapeutic to watercolor, so I don't stress out. It's just paper and ink, and if you screw up you can always start over and try again. Now I'm just going to come in with some water and just soften a little bit of that snow on top of those houses, on those roofs. Just to make them look a little more snowy. So now I'm coming in here with some African violet and I'm going to create some window panes. So these will look like houses with windows. I think this step, to me, just adds so much to your projects. Just to create this simple little step is just so impactful, I think. It really brings the scene all together. So you'll see me do this in a lot of my projects, whether it's you know, a light coming from inside the windows or the window panes. I just think it's so much fun to watch the project come to life. And don't forget to color your doors either. And then our last, yes, also come in with your fine tip and put in some of those details that might have got washed away, like your little door handles, and you could even color in or you can make your windows with that fine tip as well. I chose to use my paintbrush, but you can use the fine tip if it's easier for you. And finally, just going to sign and date it. And that's our project for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this project. And if you'd like to see more, click on the videos below and subscribe to my channel. For more information, check out my blog, and I hope to see you in the next video. Have a great day.